our coaches really can't get at the kids until the end of their junior year. Right about now, in the in the spring period of their junior year, is really the first time from a recruiting NCAA standpoint that our coaches can get at these kids. So that already puts an onus on our coaches. In essence, we're already a little bit behind if you think about it that way. Now there's other things, there's some email, there's camps and clinics where kids are on campus, unofficial visits, where we can talk to them and start advising them. But really the mass recruiting, the focused recruiting really starts now in April for kids that will sign next February, okay? And so it becomes critical for our coaches to get us that academic information so that we can advise those possible signees to make sure that they're in the correct classes to ultimately be eligible to come to Auburn. So turn the page. Talked about core courses, we know what they are. A prospective student athlete must attain 16 core courses in order to be eligible here at Auburn, okay? 16 core courses. Now it's broken down there, relatively easy. You can see it. It's 4 English, it's 3 math, it's 2 natural science with the lab if they have it, 1 year of additional English or math, 2 years of social science, and 4 years of other core courses. Non-doctoral religion, this is where you'll see foreign languages, this maybe you'll see some psychology in there, just depends on what the high school is determining to be core courses. Now I should note, take a little time out here. The high school gets to determine what their core courses are. But they actually send that to the NCAA Eligibility Center. And the Eligibility Center actually will review each of those core courses, each of those class descriptions. And a lot of times will make high schools provide additional information to determine if they even qualify as a core course. Which is why it's incredibly important for us to look at the list to see what's been approved by the NCAA in order to then to advise a prospective student athlete and our coaching staff what this individual is short and what they're going to need in their senior year.
Rich, when it says 3 years of math, algebra 1 or higher,
yes.
Do all 3 need to be algebra 1 or higher, or just
yes.
the top thing? Oh.
It's algebra 1 or higher. So usually you'll see algebra 1, you'll see geometry, algebra 2, pre-calc, calculus. Sometimes it depends on, there's some schools that just use different terminology. It may be math, it may be a terminology of math 101 or math 1A, math 4A. That's where the NCAA would say, okay, school, that's kind of a weird name. Send us the information, show us what it is. They'll ask for the textbook, they'll ask for the syllabus. Show us what that course is so that we can determine if it is at the level that we've deemed appropriate to be college preparatory to qualify for a core course. Great question. Okay? Okay, so we know we need core courses. We need 16 core courses. We know how we need to break them down. We then need to go to the sliding scale. And what I mean by sliding scale is that we used to just have flat out cut scores. I don't know if you remember us talking about that. But we used to say you need to have an 820 on your SAT, you need to have a 2.0. And if you didn't meet those requirements, you automatically were not eligible at an NCAA institution. That has changed. We now use a sliding scale. And so basically I can explain to you is the higher your grade point average, the lower your test score has to be. Okay? Flip it. The higher your test score is, the lower your grade point average can be. So much so, if I have a 4.0 in my 16 core courses, I can walk in, take the SAT, sign my name to it, get my 400, and I'm going to be qualified under NCAA standards. So it's important for a grade point average. A couple things behind that. Again, think about the intent. A lot of times you have to ask why. Okay? There were some issues about what is the best predictor. Really what we're talking about here with initial eligibility standards are predictors for collegiate success. And they're national predictors. They're not just Auburn predictors, but they're national predictors. So the NCAA has an unbelievable amount of data that they've been able to look at to say if you attain 16 core courses broken down in these subcategories and you graduate from high school and you meet this sliding scale, your likelihood of success in college in your first year is high. Does that mean it's perfect? No, it's high, okay? Also want to step back and take a time out. Does not mean they meet admission standards at institutions. Every institution has their own admission standards. That's where Susan comes in for us. Susan works to get these individuals through the eligibility center, but then she works with our enrollment services to make sure that they're meeting our admission standards as well. Therefore, sometimes you can be a qualifier and not meet our admission standards. sometimes you can be a non-qualifier and meet our admission standards. And I'll explain that to you in a moment as we keep going. Okay, so there's sliding scale. So drop down to that last part, that last slide on page 2. It just talks about where you can find that sliding scale for those who own an NSA manual, internal auditing. On page 162, you'll also hear people refer to as indexing. He or she didn't index, or they did index. Just another terminology for sliding scale. Hey, they didn't have the appropriate grade point average to equate out to their test score, or vice versa. Yes?
Is their GPA calculated on just 16 core courses or all courses?
Great question. I'm going to get there, but I'll go ahead. The question was, is the GPA calculated on just their core courses or all their core courses? And from an NCAA standpoint, it is just their core courses. It's their 16 core courses. Again, a difference in admission standards. Many institutions do it off of your grade point average, your high school grade point average, which means what don't you see here? You don't see PE courses in here. You don't see band in here. You don't see choir in here. You don't see courses that may be legitimate high school courses, but are not college preparatory courses. There may be an accounting course you took or an economics course. There may be something along those lines that, for whatever reason, it doesn't meet the core course standard from an NCAA standpoint, but still meets high school graduation standards, and also could meet Auburn standards or another institution standards. So, great question, which is why sometimes we'll be working with the admissions office, and we're saying, hey, this person has a 3.2 grade point average, and the admissions office is saying, no, we have them at 3.6. And we have to go back and remind everyone, yes, that's because you're counting some other courses that we can't incorporate into. Great question. Okay?
Another question.
Yes.
GPA, is that a 4.0 scale across the board, even if they're a 6.0 school?
Great question. Robert's question is, the GPA, is it a 4-point scale across the board? The answer is yes, in general terms. But there are institutions that have different scales, okay? Depending on how that does, they will convert it for us, in essence, though. So you may have someone who has a 4.5 grade point average. It depends on if that 4.5 is still on a 4-point scale or a 5-point scale for us to determine what they need from an indexing standpoint. But for this session, the 4.0 is based upon the 4-point, basically an A is a 4, a B is a 3, a C is a 2, a D is a 1, and an F is a 0. When you think about it that way around, okay? Any other questions about that? All right, let's turn the page then. You have your high school grade point average. You pretty much just hit all that, so great transition. Only the core courses, has to be approved by the NCAA. It's very important, it's critical for us. Here's the deal. If we're working on a transcript and the transcript says algebra on it, okay? And the core course that's approved at the NCAA says Algebra 1, the NCAA will not take it. So it's incredibly important for us to go back to that high school and find out what algebra is that. Sometimes there are still some high schools in the state of Alabama that are handwriting their transcripts. Very few, but we still see one every once in a while. And so sometimes they have someone who's been there for 40 years, he or she's been writing it out, and they just misspell something. Or they put the number 2 instead of the number 3. That's critically important for us to make sure that that gets corrected. Because if it's not exact, there's a discrepancy there. We need to work through that with the NCAA. That could cause some eligibility issues for a prospective student athlete. Okay? So now let's go to testing. Because the testing and the grade point average really go hand in hand. Again, the higher the grade point average I have, the lower my test score can be. It can be either an ACT or SAT, doesn't matter. Does have to be taken on a national testing date under national testing conditions. So you'll hear terminology about residual tests. You can't use a residual test. So if someone keeps trying to take that test, if they're not doing it under the security standards of what ACT or SAT requires, even though they may score very well on it, and it could be used for admissions purposes sometimes at schools, the NCAA will not utilize it. It has to be on a national testing date, national testing systems for the security reasons. If you just think about it, that makes sense. You want to make sure you have the right security, that it is actually that person taking that test.